The Blue Jackets need to retool the defense. We've been talking about it all summer. Rasmus Andersson is not the answer, though. And I'm going to tell you why on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. The draft is getting closer and closer, but nothing on that front yet in terms of Don Waddell. Both picks are up for play, apparently, but they could be traded for a player. They could also be traded to package up to move up in the draft, which is very interesting, I thought. But we're not going to talk about that today. I do want to talk about the potential addition to the defense core that everyone seems to be linking Columbus to. And it seems like he's on his way out of Calgary. But I am extremely wary of Rasmus Andersson for a couple of reasons. First is I don't know that we should be taking on a player that is coming up for a contract extension next year, right? I think that if you want to go out and acquire a player, then the risk of you going out and acquiring them and A, immediately signing them to a not great contract, or B, you play them for a year and then they don't want to sign, I think is, especially if you're going to give something up, which Rasmus Andersson will probably command a fair price. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's the move. It might be, but and again, I am not the GM of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Don Waddell has been doing this a very long time and has not really given anyone a reason to distrust him in this sort of thing, but the Rasmus Andersson noise makes me kind of wary. And here's the thing. Rasmus Andersson is a fine offensive option for the defense, right? The Blue Jackets already have a lot of offensive defensemen. And we already knew that. And, he's seen as like a big physical defenseman that eats a lot of minutes. And I'm like, okay, so he's just kind of, it seems to me like he is just kind of an Ivan Provorov type player doesn't really do a bunch, if I'm being honest. But Rasmus Andersson is not physical. He doesn't hit. He is absolutely atrocious in his own zone, which I don't know how bad it was until, again, I was looking this up on, I was on hockeyviz.com, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's just that Micah's model doesn't like him, because according to Micah's model, Rasmus Andersson is a fairly reasonable offensive defenseman. And then in his own zone at 5-on-5 specifically, he is just a nightmare. He is 13% worse than average, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider that, like, some of the best offensive players in the world are, between 15 and 20% better than average, 13% worse than average seems like doesn't seem great. He was reasonable on the power play this year. The penalty kill he was not great at. But he's just, and so I looked at this and I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe Micah's model just doesn't like him, right? Here's the thing. I tried a couple of different models. I tried hockeyviz.com, which is one I always use. I looked at Money Puck, which is another one that's typically very reasonable, and I looked at hockeystatcards.com, which uses Dom Lucian's model to create stat cards, basically. And I also just kind of looked at his regular stats. So 31 points in 81 games, 11 of those were goals. I don't typically buy plus minus as a thing. He was a minus 38 this year, which doesn't mean he's a bad player, right? It does set alarm bells going in terms of like, well, his underlying stats are also not good. And I tend to look at plus minus as kind of if you're really good or really bad, there's probably something like underlying there, right? Like this is not always true. I think a lot about the year. It was probably way back. It was probably like 2013, 2014, where Alex Ovechkin was like a minus 36 on the season, and no one is sitting here and saying that Alex Ovechkin is a bad player, right? But when you look at the Calgary Flames, who were typically not very good, and were carried by a young goalie doing his best. Rasmus Andersson was a minus 38. Second place on the team was Nazem Kadri at minus 17. So that's a big gap there. In terms of all franchises, only 2 players had a worse plus minus than him: Tyler Bertuzzi in Chicago and Mason Lohrei in Boston. Again, not the be all and end all, but it does set some alarm bells ringing, right? And again, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that Rasmus Andersson is not a good player. I just think that there are parts of his game that teams can use. I just don't think Columbus is one of those teams, right? Because here's the thing. Ostensibly, they're looking for a partner for Matejchuk. What this means is, and for my money anyway, you need a shutdown guy, right? You need a defensive defenseman. You have Werenski, who is obviously all offense all the time. You have Fabro, who is a pretty good two-way guy to support Werenski. Denton Matejchuk is going to be a reasonable two-way guy, I think, but that probably leans more offense than defense, although he was one of the better defensive defensemen for the team this year. So you want a guy that's going to play defense and let him figure that out, right? And like Ivan Provorov was at his best this season when he sat back and played defense and let Matejchuk lead the way, right? I don't think you're going to get that with Andersson, especially not, he's not on a terrible contract. He's making, 4.55. He's in the last year of his contract. So he's going to want, honestly, my guess is that it's going to be a trade and extension type thing, which worries me, because I don't think that this is exactly a Severson 2.0, like I said in my little box over here. But there are the same kind of warning flags there as Severson, and my worry is that the team is going to get locked into another not ideal defenseman for multiple years, right? I don't think it'll be another Severson. I don't think that they're going to trade for him and be like, oh, here's an 8-year contract immediately. But my worry is that they'll give up assets for him, including, a first-round pick, potentially more, plus a player. And you're going to be stuck with a guy who is fine offensively, but doesn't really play defense, which is worrying because he plays so many minutes, and he's going to play a lot of minutes in Columbus, and I don't know that those minutes are going to be good, is the thing. It's not all bad. I feel like, I'm coming. It's not, I think Andersson is a better option than Provorov. But I still don't think that this is a trade that the team should make. And I think there are ways that they can make this work, but I'll talk about those in just a second here at Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack it into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. They're one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% off your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. I love the no shells variety. They come in packet sizes that I can basically just kind of rip the top off and pour the entire thing in my mouth because I'm a gremlin. But if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, if you are a fidgeter during meetings, for example, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about Rasmus Andersson today and how he's not the answer that I think a lot of Blue Jackets fans are looking for. He's a fine player. And here's the thing. If the Blue Jackets hadn't had Dante Fabro, and it sounds like we're getting conflicting reports on Dante Fabro, right? Is that some reporters on like early last week were like, it's basically done. It's going to be 20 million at either 4 or 5 years. And then, other people are saying, oh, well, the talks are close. Some people are saying the talks are not close. They've only just begun. Apparently the team thinks it's close, and Fabro's team is saying no, not quite. So, there's a lot of going on, a lot of moving parts. It's nowhere near a done deal yet. But my guess is that if they only keep one of Fabro or Provorov, Fabro's the guy, right? Rasmus Andersson is basically being brought in to play the role that Dante Fabro should be playing, right? I see a lot of people being like, well, you put Andersson next to Werenski and then you move Fabro down to play with Matejchuk. But, like, that's not, I don't know. For me, you're keeping Fabro to play with Werenski, right? Like, they played so well together. Werenski had the best season of his career next to Fabro, and I think that's not entirely Fabro. Obviously, a lot of that is Werenski, but I don't think Fabro hurt that at all. I think Werenski had a ton of fun playing with Fabro. I think that probably is a big reason why they're leaning Fabro over Provorov. Is my guess is they said, hey, Zach, do you want to keep the guy that you played with this year and had a ton of fun playing with? And he was like, yes, please. So it's not the be all and end all, but it feels like you're bringing in Rasmus Andersson to play the role that you already know Fabro can play, and you're going to get Fabro for cheaper, and you're not going to have to give up assets to get Fabro. He's also significantly younger. Rasmus Andersson, I believe, is 28 or 29. He's 28. He'll be 29 near, around about the time the season starts. I don't think. Like, this is the big problem to me, I think, is that I don't think you want Fabro with Werenski, and I don't think Andersson is a fit for Matejchuk. It could still work. And there's one way that I think it could work, but here's the thing. You're always going to have to give up assets to get Andersson, right? This is not we can grab him in free agency and see how it goes. This is you're going to have to pay to get him. But I don't know if you pay. Like, is it a case of, do you pay less to not have him come with a contract extension, right? Because I can't imagine Don Waddell bringing Andersson in. Again, we've seen how reluctant he is to pay the players that he's not familiar with, right? Like, look at Olivier's contract versus Ken Johnson's contract, for example. Not to compare the two players, but like one of those was a player that he'd watched for a year, and the other one was a player that he had only kind of seen flashes of because it wasn't on this team, right? I don't think Don Waddell is going to hand out 8 years to Rasmus Andersson immediately. But if you can get him for that 1 year and it's like a show me kind of deal, then I could be on board with that. I think, again, you'll pay less if he doesn't come with an extension. Worst case scenario, you try and flip him at the deadline next year. Obviously, the Blue Jackets don't want to be in a position where they're flipping at the deadline. They want to be buyers, not sellers. Obviously, a lot of things can change by then, but I don't know. Like, if you want to get him, like I said, a show me year before extending him, because I could be wrong. I've said it on this podcast a lot. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. Maybe Andersson will surprise me. Maybe his poor defensive play is the fact that he plays on the Calgary Flames, who have not been the most defensively robust team for a while, I think it's fair to say. And again, like, advanced stats are not the be all and end all. The real answer is somewhere between the eye test and the advanced stats. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, the model says he's bad, so he must be bad. I think that if the model says he's bad, then there's definitely, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? But I'm always looking at Bo Byram is another really good example of this. He is generally considered to be a very good young puck moving defenseman that the models absolutely hate for some reason. And sometimes the models like a guy that you can't figure out why, so it's not the be all and end all. But the fact that I've looked at 3 different models and they all kind of say the same thing. I thought what was interesting was that HockeyStatCards.com has him at a negative offense rating and a positive defense rating. His net rating is still net negative, but what I thought was interesting is that he takes a lot of penalties. He allows a lot of goals. His expected goals is bad. His penalty kill is bad. His defensive contribution in their model is that he blocks a lot of shots, which I don't really consider a consistent and like reasonable form of defense. I'm not John Tortorella, but I thought that was interesting that he blocks so many shots that's actually pushed his defense rating up. That's the only thing on his defense card that's in the positive. Everything else is in the negative. But apparently he blocks so many shots that's pushed his defense higher, which I thought was really interesting. In terms of offense, his plus minus, like the goals that are scored while he's on the ice, apparently is so bad that it's pushed his offense rating into the negative, despite being really quite good at creating offense, contributing his own offense. And like he's not the most prolific goal scorer in the world. He's a defenseman, obviously, but he's about a half a point a game in his career, which is, is not nothing. It's the defense that worries me. That being said, a lot of players this season improved on their defense under Dean Everson, right? Which I thought is interesting. And I wonder if it's not necessarily like a I can fix him type thing. I do wonder if Andersson is a kind of guy that will flourish in Everson's system. I'm not 100% convinced. I'm willing to be convinced, right? But I just don't know that you want to give up assets for a guy that only has 1 year left on his contract, or give up assets for a guy, sign him to an extent. Like, and these are obviously the two options, right? And it feels like I'm saying no to both. But I'm saying no, both things are bad. But like, maybe I'm expressing myself badly. But it's been known to happen. I personally don't think that this is the trigger that they should pull. There is some smoke around it. People are saying, that Rasmus Andersson is moving on and the Blue Jackets are looking to make a splash. Like, and it feels I don't know, like for me, it's see what happens with the picks. If you have to, like, I don't know, I probably wouldn't give up a first round pick for Andersson. Like, I worry too much about it being a Severson 2.0. And then you're stuck again with a bunch of right defensemen that are reasonable offensively and can't keep the puck out the net defensively, or can't keep the puck away from the goalie defensively. Which is, kind of the problem that I had this year. I don't know that Anderson's a little old for my liking. Not like too old. He's around the same age as a lot of the defensemen that we're looking at. And age is not necessarily like no, this guy won't be useful. I mentioned offhand Dmitry Orlov the other day, who is a million years old. He's not. He's like 35. But is still very, very reasonable at keeping the puck away from the goalie. And, that to me feels like a more reasonable option than Andersson. Obviously, we're all big Gavrikov fans here. We're all hoping that Gavrikov comes home. I am not super convinced that it's going to happen, but to me, he is the number one guy, right? He's the guy that you want to bring into the team. But if you can't get him, someone like Orlov is potentially an option. Another option that, again, I haven't talked about a ton is Nick Perbix, who doesn't do a lot, but is one of those guys that, like I say, he's one of those advanced stats darlings. Like, he is quietly a very, very good depth defenseman. And I don't know off the top of my head whether he plays left or right. I should know this, and I don't. But someone like that, again, it feels like you don't need to make a big splashy trade for defense. Not unless you want to go out and get, a 23-year-old like Bo Byram or Owen Power or, someone like that. Spending a lot of assets on someone like Rasmus Andersson to me feels unideal. There is another way that this could work. So I've talked a little bit about, you trade him, and you do this 1 year show me thing. And before signing the extension, which I do think is probably what's more likely to happen based on Don Waddell's unwillingness to pay for plays he's not super familiar with, right? There is another option. And I don't think that this option is likely, but I do think it's the best case scenario for the Blue Jackets. So we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I want to tell you about FanDuel, because it's summer sports time. Whether you're all about baseball, whether you're into golf on the green, high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to keep track of what is going on in baseball because, in my experience, everyone is complaining about the Yankees, but the Yankees continue to win games, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. Are you new to FanDuel? New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked a lot about how Rasmus Andersson is not the answer because we're worried about turning into Damon Severson 2.0, right? Here's the thing. If you can somehow do a trade for Andersson that involves Severson, which you will probably have to give up more by adding Severson than you would for not trading with him, right? Like, you're going to have to give probably a first-round pick plus just to give up Severson's contract and then add to get the value of Andersson. But if you can do a swap of those two players, like, I am immediately much happier because a lot of this has kind of been my problem with a lot of the talk about the defense, right? Is that a lot of my worry about keeping Provorov is, well, we already have one bad contract on defense. I don't want another one. You know, like, Zach Werenski's going to be up for a contract in a couple of years. Denton Matej's going to need more money in a couple of years. Like, I know the Blue Jackets have $1 billion in cap space right now, but that's going to go away, right? Fantilli needs a new contract. Kent Johnson's going to need a new contract, etc., etc., etc. Karamarchenko's going to need a new contract. Like, I could go on and on. If you can get out from under the Severson contract, that doesn't mean that, like, you can swap the Severson contract with an equally bad contract, but I think that the Andersson contract will look less egregious if Severson is not there taking up all that room, right? And maybe this is just my Severson bias, but if you can get out from under that contract, I could see them bringing in someone like Andersson to not necessarily be the bad contract, but it makes any contract he signs a little bit more palatable, right? Because you're not going to be paying, $6.5 million for Severson and $6.5 million for Andersson, both of whom don't defend. It's really going to be Andersson is better than Severson. I think he's better offensively. I would be willing to entertain arguments that he's better defensively as well. I don't have the Severson numbers in front of me, but I can pull them up real quick. But yeah, so Damon Severson is better offensively, worse defensively, according to Hockey Stat Cards. But in terms of specifics, again, his defense is he just can't keep the puck away from the goalie. That's his problem, right? Which is a big issue. So Andersson, to kind of go back to my original point, I got distracted by just how bad David Severson is at defense. This team is better if you swap Andersson for Severson, straight up. Having both of them on the team, I don't think is the move. But if you can somehow, and this doesn't even need to be like you send Severson to Calgary, like if you can offload Severson, I saw someone mulling over the fact that the Rangers could go after someone like Severson, which I would be more than happy with. Like, if you can get Severson's contract off the team, the Andersson contract seems much better. I still don't think he's going to move the needle. I still don't think that Rasmus Andersson is the answer to transforming the blue line or retooling the blue line or whatever it is, just because I think they already have enough of that type of player. And again, I'm not saying he's a bad player. I just think that they already have 2.5 offensive defensemen, right? You need a guy that plays defense. And Eric Branson doesn't count. Sorry about it. Like, I don't think that Gavrikov is necessarily the answer, or I don't think he will be the answer. I think he probably is the answer, but you have to look at a guy that is good defensively and not just a guy that people assume is good at defense because he plays a lot of minutes. Playing a lot of minutes is not a precursor to being good at defense. And that's my piece. And I'm sure this will make many people very annoyed with this episode, but I looked into the numbers. It's not me, it's the math. Thanks for listening to this episode. That's all I've got today. I'm hoping to get another episode out tonight about the upcoming draft. My hope is that I can do like a mini episode about a potential draft pick every night this week as we lead into the draft. Don't hold me to that, but that's what I'm going to try my best to do. And so keep an eye out for that. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I'm BJ Foster. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show on Blue Sky at LO-Blue Jackets, or one word. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.